Thank you, Richard. And yes, we did open about half a year ago here up in Clark, in Berteville number 3, and that is our first center here. And we are now pursuing our first center in Subic. We'll be looking towards Baguio and also a second center here in Clark. But this is not intended to be a business presentation, and so I appreciate very much the sales pitch, because that's really not why I'm here. And you might wonder how come that middle-aged Viking from Denmark can be standing up here telling about how to build a team and drive productivity in the Philippines. But I actually did move here first time in 1992. So my social security number is actually older than the average Filipino. So that is the closest I get to being a millennial. That will be the age of that number. But otherwise, I guess I consider myself a quasi-millennial at least. As you can see from the logos behind me, I work for different organizations. I have moved countries 9 times, and I have had the opportunity, therefore, to pick up best practices from many different businesses, but also many different cultures. And a main theme in what I'm trying to convey is really how you boil it down and impress those best practices on your team as you build it and drive their productivity here in the Philippines. First of all, a little bit about myself. Yes, I'm from Denmark and I was raised on a farm, so I do know how to drive a tractor and sort of like a lot of basic stuff from back then. I also did a lot of wheeling dealing, trading animals, and I also wanted to become international, so therefore when I was 12 years old, I decided to join a company called the East Asiatic Company. About 8 years later, when I was old enough for that, they hired me. At that time, I'd just done a thesis on Danish export to ASEAN. Back then, there was only the five ASEAN countries. And that thesis was then published in a newspaper, so I actually had to drop out of university and then join the company, East Asiatic Company. There's nothing that I'm going to say that you cannot say "Siempre naman tu," because it's all very, very, very basic. And there's rarely anything in business, whether you are assessing a sari-sari store or the Coca-Cola Corporation, you should be able to boil it down to approximately 3 key factors for success. And then it's really a matter about how you convey and impress that and implement it within your own business. I'm building my cases on the 4 business scenarios that I'm most proud of during my working life. And coincidentally, all 4 of them have actually been here in the Philippines. So there must be something that works in the Philippines when I'm here for me or for the Philippines, or both ways. Maybe it's the Philippines that brings out the best in me, maybe the other way around, maybe a little bit of both. But there's a Philip Morris story, which I call Living the Sari-Sari Business, and then there's Back on the Farm, and I was working for Dole Pineapple. And one time with Coca-Cola Company, I declared Cold War in a tropical country. So there's a pretty good case, and then I will round it up with how we have been expanding successfully the business now with Regus. But let's start with the Sari-Sari story, and this is back in 1992 when I came here. You really need to understand your customers, and it sounds so basic and absurd, but it is incredible how many don't. In the Coca-Cola Corporation, there were some very bright people who have worked their way up. They were not necessarily from the most affluent homes, but they were very skilled, and they felt that they had earned the right to sit behind the desk in that office they had been placed in. You cannot be a channel marketing manager or anything about that if you are about putting yourself above going out meeting and understanding your customers. By the way, Sari-Sari stores represents more than 95% of the volume sold by Philip Morris. Philip Morris cigarettes are sold 1 stick at a time. You have almost 1 million Sari-Sari stores. So I immediately went out and visited and interviewed and mapped about 5,000 of them. I walked the barangays of Tondo and Caloocan, North, South Luzon, Visayas, and Mindanao. And there's literally no business that I know any better than a Sari-Sari store, to be honest. But what was important was that I also brought all other people from our organization out with me, even, let's say, an encoder. To be an encoder to enter that data that is being gathered out in the field is a very trivial job. But if it is not encoded accurately, then we are going to have a very big issue or problem when we are going to implement the new distribution structure. So I made sure that everybody walked out with me. So I was leading from the front or from behind, whatever you want to call it. But they were standing with me in the sun, spending about 25 minutes per sari-sari store. And at the same time, we had about 200-300 people at any given time out interviewing and mapping sari-sari stores. It became a very successful practice. It became a best practice throughout Asia Pacific. And they even came from Africa also to see how it was that we had implemented that. But the learning there was really you need to understand your customer and you need to understand it yourself. And if you're already a CEO in your company, I would say shame on you if you're not out every so often meeting with your customers. And if you're not the CEO, then go back and tell your CEO from me, shame on you, because you really must be very much hands-on in order to understand your own business. Then I moved on to Dole, and since I came from Japan and speak Japanese, and it is the biggest export market for Dole, then coincidentally, the Asia Pacific head office is in Makati. But I insisted I'm not going to go to Tokyo and face a customer and address issues unless I understand the product also extremely well. So, and often when you're dealing with Japanese, they will really be splitting hair about if there was a small damage on a product. It doesn't take much, then it becomes a very big issue. If you want to relate to people, then you really have to speak from your heart. And what you have been reading in a manual will never come from your heart. I mean, you really have to do it hands-on. So I asked to be sent down to the plantation for 2 weeks. It's a fantastic place to be down in South Polomalok, South Cotabato, in Polomalok. It's about 34,000 acres, 18,000 employees nationwide. 24 hours a day, every day, year-round. They're planting and they're harvesting at any given time. So I worked 2 shifts a day. I was planting, I was harvesting, I was working in the cannery. I tried everything. And I actually also learned that it was a pretty perfect process, so I couldn't really see what could go wrong with the product until I revisited some of the complaints from Japan and learned that it was really something that went wrong during transportation. So what I did instead of flying back to Manila was that I canceled my airfare ticket and I was allowed on a very old Aboitiz vessel where I was given the radio guy's cabin just under the bridge, so he was probably out there sleeping on the deck. What was most remarkable about that cabin, by the way, was there were 5 locks down the door, and they still gave me a baseball bat to sleep with just for security. Our biggest concern was that salt water would enter the containers because canned pineapple and salt water doesn't mix very well, but I learned that it was like, we had another problem that was much bigger, namely that there's a lot of livestock on top of the containers, and they obviously go number 1 and 2. And even though I'm raised on a farm, the smell on that ship was absolutely unbelievable. One morning when I unlocked the 5 locks and opened the door, there was a live pig staring at me. And I stared at the pig, and I realized I had a camera in my hand, so I took a picture, and that became the cover picture on that trip report. And I think that's probably still being circulated actually in Dole. So, but again, it's hard work, but it's a matter about, I mean, you need to be in your business with your stomach, with your heart, and with your mind, and this is the best way to do it, and it will show when you later on interact with your customers as well as with your team. Then came my time with Coca-Cola. And here, try to think backwards always. I mean, especially Coca-Cola, very good at brand building, the very Harvard graduates within marketing, they're doing all the TV commercials. It's all top-down. But why not start at the place of consumption? If you talk to the bottler, not the company, then they say, oh, point of sales, we need to do some merchandising in the Sari-Sari store, or at SM supermarket, etc. But that's the wrong starting point. You need to go further back and say, okay, where and when and why and how are people consuming a Coca-Cola? And if a Coca-Cola is being consumed in this country, it is more than likely being shared between 2 or more Filipinos who are doing it therefore in a social setting, and they have bought it within the last 60 minutes, which means that they have bought it for immediate consumption. Now, Coca-Cola have so much research, and I could see that if a Coca-Cola was cold enough, we would sell 40% more. That's a volume growth of 40%. We're already the 6th largest market in the world, but we were undercool. So I wanted to get all 13,000 employees on the same page. A cold Coke is a sold Coke, and we had to expand on the cold drink availability. So I was allowed to buy 45,000 new refrigerators from Unimagna, by the way, here in the Philippines, and this was in the late 90s during the Asian crisis, so it was an interesting timing to save a company, to say the least. But it was, again, I mean, things have to be very, very basic, and there are so many who will always challenge you when you're making things too simple. To buy 45,000 refrigerators, you cannot ask the bottle to do that. It's simply too much money. So we had to go, Coca-Cola company, to Atlanta, and I had to present my case. And then there's some really senior Coca-Cola guys, including one who unfortunately had not yet retired, but it looked like he was just about to. And when I had presented my case, he said, "Yeah, Lars, and then they will just put fish and meat in that fridge." And of course, we did not want them to contaminate the coolers. I'm sure you all know the coolers, glass door, and there's light on, you can see inside, right? You don't want them to contaminate it with Pepsi in particular. Actually, you don't want them to contaminate it with fish and meat either. But that's not number one problem. Number one problem is that they turn off the fridge at night. And they even reminded to do so because there is light in it. So when he said to me, "Lars, they're just going to put fish and meat in it," then everybody was laughing at me, and then I paused, and then I said, "Yeah, and what will then happen to the fish and the meat when they turn off the fridge?" And then it got very quiet until they all started laughing at him. So my solution was basically to allow fish and meat at the bottom shelf, put on a POS material just to cover that, and then of course make sure that they don't put in Pepsi products. So the key to success in cold drink availability was basically fish and meat. Always find some very basic rules, and then, by the way, conveyed a very effective. And when I declared a Cold War, I was standing on a stage like this at the Peninsula Hotel, and there were hundreds of people, and there was a thermometer behind me, 5 meters tall, and it got colder and colder as I was speaking. And I had hidden all my winter clothes from Scandinavia where I was up on stage, so I pretended to get more and more chilly and cold, and I got more and more dressed. So when I was done presenting, I was all dressed up for a snowstorm, basically. I did earn the nickname Mr. Bean at that event, but I thought it was a very small price to pay for having 13,000 people being on exactly the same page as a cold Coke is a sold Coke. In addition to the more than 1 dozen plants that the bottlers had, we had over 200 sales offices, and it was not even my idea to put up banners saying Cold War in every single sales office. But everybody found it. I mean, I guarantee I could have started a revolution in this country that year. And by the way, that year we also sold more Coca-Cola here than in China, so obviously it definitely worked. Then eventually I moved on to Regus. And Regus came here in 1999, so had been here for a long time, and I think it's very admirable that Regus sort of saw the light here by making an investment and opened the first location in the Enterprise Center in 1999 in lieu of the Asian crisis. And then up until the year 2012, we went from 1 to 4 locations. And then suddenly I entered the equation as country manager. It was a new structure. It was also a global strategy. We should grow faster. And I can guarantee you it's very difficult to come in, and I think most of you have tried this, and try to change things radically all over in an organization. And it should not be a secret. I mean, my first 9 months, a lot of the employees, they tried to get rid of me. They placed phone calls to group, etc., who luckily backed me up. But my advice is, in those scenarios, is basically every single practice that they already have in place was implemented for the right reason at the time it was implemented. So you have to show respect for that. I mean, it's a little bit like a loved one in the family passes away. I mean, we do really put them to rest with respect, right? But life goes on. And that is sort of like basically how you have to convey it to your team. And there will always be a few who will still refuse and literally get rid of them, because they can do a lot of damage to your future growth. And very quickly after the ninth month, after the third month, we opened center number 5, and then 1 month later we doubled up the size of an existing center, and before the first calendar year was over, so that was when the 9 in December, and I joined in April, we added another 3 locations, and then we've basically just been growing with 50% after that. But basically, number 1, I mean, very important lesson is to show respect for the established, even though you have to put it to rest, but that is the most effective way to do so. And then otherwise, and this one never fails, if you make your team shine, so will you, so will your business. And your success will always be on your team. And that can be difficult in a business like mine, where we have now 25 locations, and full-time employees in each center, each location are 3 people only. So 25 times 3, that's 75. So now I have 75 people at 25 locations, and I want them all to be on the same page, same message, exactly the same way as with Coca-Cola when I declared Cold War, etc. And in that regard, you should never underestimate the value of marketing. The best way to communicate internally is really to do it externally. If I'm on 30 minutes on ANC with Coco, which I've been, employees come home and then their neighbor, family, friends say, oh, don't you work for Regus? I think I saw your boss on TV. And then immediately they will say, yeah, oh yeah, and then they will start repeating and telling everything that I said. So suddenly we're all advocating exactly the same thing. So marketing can be used for many things, and it's not just a matter about creating demand. It's really a matter about building the bridge between everybody, moving on in the same direction. So here are a few more examples, and I love marketing, so just another day at the office with Miss Universe and a lot of other good fun. One time, going back, I had a truck mocked up as an office and hired an actor, and we were driving around non-stop in Metro Manila for 3 months, and the actor was sitting in a suit working very hard, and people thought it was hilarious and took pictures and tried to address him, and he was always too busy to talk to them. And then one time there was a very big business convention at the Shangri-La in Makati, and I asked, can I please park the truck right there? Because it's great entertainment, and Shangri-La thought it was a great idea. So they also took pictures of our truck in front of their hotel. Then a few weeks later, AmCham had an APEC meeting at New World Hotel, so I wanted to do the same. And New World Hotel said no, because that's competing business. I don't know how they came up with that, but that was what they claimed. Now, luckily, I was signed up to attend that event, so that week, that was my company car. So every morning, it came and picked me up, and the actor and I, we would simulate a meeting in the truck as we were driving to the New World Hotel. And then when it pulled up at the front entrance, then the driver would come out with a little ladder, and I would take my briefcase, and then I would walk in. And of course, that was great PR, because that entire week, everybody came over and had to talk to me, and you are the guy with the truck, etc. So, I mean, in the Philippines in particular, everybody will go very far for a good laugh, also at their own expense, and in marketing, it never fails, that's for sure. And then some recognition is every so often earned, and of course, again, it comes down to the team effort, and I never make a secret out of that. As it was also indicated by Richard, we are very, very successful in the Philippines compared to our global business. We are in 120 countries, 900 cities, over 3,000 locations, but basically probably no country have managed to grow and manage the growth as well as the Philippines have. So basically all of Asia Pacific is today being benchmarked against the Philippines, and it is always more fun to be the lead dog in the pack, and the view is better there anyway than the dogs following behind, right? So the essence is that know your customers' businesses. That was the sari-sari stories. Understand your products by heart, here and working hard, hands-on, planting, harvesting in the middle of the night, grassroots thinking, that is that one thinking backwards, right? With Coca-Cola, okay, if they have bought it within the last 60 minutes for immediate consumption, it better be ice cold or cold enough. And by the way, in regards to grassroots thinking, that was one thing that I also introduced with Regus, because with Regus it was like, Lars, what is the demand and the need in the Philippines? And we got about 85 inquiries per month. And then we were very good at saying, out of 85 inquiries, we should get approximately 40 meetings. Out of 40 meetings, we should get approximately 35 signatures. And last, that you should be able to do an average of 29 days. And I had to tell management they absolutely missed the most important equation here, and that is not the conversion of inquiries to tours or tours and meetings to signatures. It was look at the need, because need does not equal demand. If I'm thirsty and I don't know Coca-Cola is a drink, I'm not going to order a Coca-Cola. I'm going to order anything from a glass of water, San Miguel, coffee, anything. I will not order that Coca-Cola. You need to make sure that there's built a bridge so that people know that there actually is a solution. Whenever we go to a new place, including Clark, including Davao, where we are opening next week, and Cebu, where we just opened our second center, we basically got close to zero, if not absolutely zero inquiries from those places before we opened the center. So you have to make sure that it's being advocated, and you're up, like I'm standing here now, and making awareness that there is a solution called Regus. People know what their need is, but they have to make that connection. And that's very, very important for the business, and you can't drive it without it. And in the Philippines, it's very easy, actually, when you get outside Metro Manila, because Metro Manila is so exaggerated and is so rare that circus comes to town. So, you know, if you're speaking in Mactan or you're Bacolod or Iloilo or similar places, people really come attend and listen and make notes, and the next morning you can read in the newspaper what it was that you said. It's not that difficult to come out and get the speaking time outside Metro Manila, whereas within Metro Manila we are probably quite a bit exaggerated because we are spoiled with so many different events all the time. So it could be a full-time job. And then finally, reinvent, but always with respect for the past. And that was pretty much it from me for now, and I'll be part of the panel later. Thank you.